phenomenon of inflation that has hit the world. Department of Statistics Malaysia report Malaysia's unemployment rate in November 2021 fell below 700,000 people for the first time since April 2020.
Inflation is the rate at which the value of a currency is falling, and consequently the general level of price index, which means CPI, and the wholesale price index, which means WPI. In 2022, the average inflation in Malaysia was at around 125.9% compared to the year 2021, which was 123.1%. The term employment refers to a situation when the person is searching for employment but is unable to find a job. In 2022, the employment rate in Malaysia was at about 3.9%. The bar chart shows the population in Malaysia from 2021 until 2022. For each gender, there are more males than females in both years. Based on histogram, the export price in Malaysia increased to 143 points in April 2022 from 141.6 points in March 2022. Malaysian main import are electrical products, electronic, palm oil, processed petroleum oil, and many more. For help, Malaysia export goods sell to foreign countries as well, and export prices are increasing every year. Based on Instagram, import price in Malaysia increased to 129 points in April 2022 from 125.9 points in March 2022. Because Malaysia may import electrical and electronic products and has many other products that many goods from abroad enter, and can increase import of foreign goods into Malaysia. The column shows that the population in Malaysia from 2021 until 2022 from the Malaysian industrial product that's expanded by 4.6% year-on-year in April 2022, below market forecast of 5.6% and easing from 1% growth in the previous month, pointing to the 8 straight months of an increase on a monthly basis. Industrial output budget 4.5%, reversing strongly from an 8.6% jump in March, which was the high reading since June 2020. The employment rate in Malaysia declined to 3.9% in April 2022 from 4.6% in the same month a year earlier. As the economy recovered from the coronavirus disruption, the latest reading dipped below 4% for the first time since COVID-19 outbreak began in early 2020. The number of employees dropped 12.6% from a year earlier to 649.3 thousand, while employee increased to 3.3% to 15.85 million. Meantime, the labor force 2.5% to 16.50 million in March 2022. The jobless rate was at 4.1%. The histogram shows the population in Malaysia from 2021 until 2022. The gross domestic product GDP performance in the year 2022 grew RM 380 billion. From the current economic standing, the economic performance for the first quarters of 2022 has surpassed the level of first quarters 2021 by RM 359 billion. According to the histogram, Malaysia saw the greatest rate of the worldwide growth during the first quarters of 2022 is 5.0%, and fourth quarters for 2021 is 6.1%. The next lowest rate of the global growth development in Malaysia, where is 3.1% for the first quarters of this year and 4.0% for the fourth. Despite the challenges won by the military crisis in Ukraine and lockdown in China, the growth rebounds backed by economic reopening and global commerce remain robust due to high energy costs, a resumption of supply chain disruption, and a tight labor market. Inflation in key industry economy remains higher.
Inflation is known as a macroeconomic problem. Inflation is a situation where the general price level for a basket of goods and services in Malaysia increases permanently from year to year in Malaysia.
Next, continue with the type of inflation in Malaysia. There are two types of inflation. The first one is demand pull inflation. Demand pull refers to the inflation in the economy caused by strong consumers' demand in which aggregate demands exceeds aggregate supply. Second is cost push inflation. It is an increase in the production cost of goods and services. In other words, it is the result of salaries activity. Furthermore, is the unemployment in Malaysia. Unemployment occurs when people of working age are ready and willing to serve but fail to find adequate work. Next is the type of unemployment rate in Malaysia. There are four types of unemployment rate. The first is structural unemployment. This unemployment occurs when the structure of an economy changes. Second is seasonal unemployment. It happens when a certain product cannot be produced during a certain season. The third is frictional unemployment. This is temporary unemployment. It occurs when people are in between jobs, either entering or re-entering the workforce. Finally is the cyclical unemployment. This unemployment is caused by a decline in aggregate demand due to a change in the business cycle.
Causes unemployment. First, functional unemployment. Nowadays, most companies prefer to hire experienced people over those who haven't not work experience. In Malaysia, unemployed graduates have grown to be an extreme case. There are over 200,000 graduates who have yet to get any job in 2020. Number of graduates in Malaysia in 2020 increased by 4.4% to 5.36%. This affects graduates who want to work because most companies only hire more experienced people. Second, seasonal unemployment. Since 2019, COVID-19 cases hit the whole country including Malaysia. COVID-19 cases are increased in Malaysia, which causes the Prime Minister has introduced the Movement Control Order (MCO) on 18 March 2020 so that COVID-19 cases do not become widespread. With the existence of MCO, many were affected by it, especially in terms of employment as well as rising unemployment. Based on the data beside, show June unemployment rose by 4.8% to 768,000, 4.5% in May after 4 consecutive months of decreases by the Statistics Department. Causes inflation. First, demand pull inflation. Aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. It happens when money being spent on the few goods. In Malaysia, due to the COVID-19 pandemic since 2020, people tend to do panic buying in order to avoid going outside from home regularly. For example, they buy chicken in bulk, causing the demand for chicken to increase. As a result, the demand increased drastically as many people tend to buy goods in large quantity. Second, causes inflation in Malaysia are cost push inflation. Malaysia faced cost push inflation due to the pandemic outbreak. This is because the world economy faced problem. There was a drastically increase in the price for many products. For example, fuel price. It was reported that Malaysia's gross domestic product (GDP) had shrunk 3.4 in the 40 quarter of 2020. As a result, there is an increase in price of goods and service.
Therefore, through previous study on inflation, we can list some measures that can be taken to control inflation in Malaysia. Among others, by using a contractionary fiscal policy, where this measure can control excessive aggregate demand even if the supply release is small. The government has implemented the Sales and Service Tax (SST) on September 2018 until now, and this has caused disposable income to decline. Therefore, the implementation of SST will lower the purchasing power and consumer demand, and in turn to reduce aggregate spending. Also, the government can use the money from the SST tax collection for chicken subsidies. Contractionary monetary policy is also one of the measures used to control inflation in Malaysia. During inflation, the Central Bank of Bank Negara Malaysia used contractionary monetary policy to reduce the money supply and increase interest rate to reduce aggregate spending. For example, Bank Negara Malaysia has raised interest rates on loans. When interest rates are raised, the cost of borrowing and the debt burden borne by borrowers will increase. Hence, there is a shortage of loans where the money supply in the market will be reduced. That's why the consumer purchasing power of fuel will decrease and the demand will also decrease. With the measure used, Malaysia can overcome the problem of inflation so that it does not get worse, and this can also reduce the country's inflation rate.
These are how the microeconomics solve the problem. One of them, to overcome the problem of unemployment. Fiscal policy is the one way that can be used to overcome the problem of unemployment. The government of Malaysia has initiated a program called Jana Kerja Keluarga Malaysia, which has the objective of creating 600,000 jobs with a budget of 2 billion ringgit by the year of 2020. Under this program, employee hiring new employees who are not actively with an incentive equivalent to 20% of your monthly salary for the first 6 months and 30% for the following 6 months on condition that monthly salary is 1,500 and above. This is an effort to help people to get a job. For the monetary policy, the Malaysian Central Bank said that the banking industry would provide a selective loan monetary extension after 6-month blanket moratorium was lifted after the COVID-19 pandemic. Individuals who are still working but whose earnings have been impacted by this pandemic will provide a lesser loan installment in proportion to their salary decrease. Bank also provide individual and borrower in the manufacturing sector with the repayment flexibility, such as allowing temporary interest-only payments and extending payback period.
In conclusion, Malaysia's inflation and unemployment increased drastically. The highest rate for inflation due to the COVID-19 and full price. For unemployment, the highest rate comes from the unemployed graduates and existing of the MCO. Malaysia managed the problem of unemployment with the government of Malaysia initiate a program called Jamin Kerja Keluarga Malaysia, and BNN will be required to extend the loan moratorium. Then the government managed the problem of inflation by implementing the SST, reduce the money supply and increase interest rates. For the suggestion, Malaysia should change its industrial technique to solve the problems of unemployment. For example, encourage technological change of labor by taking on a lot of additional labor to increase the unemployment in Malaysia. Next, the government can use wage and price controls to fight inflation. Other than that, the government of Malaysia can also employ a contractionary monetary policy to fight inflation by reducing the money supply within an economy. The contractionary monetary policy is the one of popular method of controlling inflation. If Malaysia face the same problems of unemployment and inflation, Malaysia can overcome it inflation and unemployment have a detrimental effect on economic development in Malaysia. The government of Malaysia has successfully solved the problems of unemployment and inflation well, and if it happens again, it is certain that the government will take the same initiative.